Good morning, everyone. I am Montgomery County President Gabe Albornoz, and welcome this morning on this Tuesday, April 26th, for our full council agenda and session. We will begin this morning with three important proclamations, and the first proclamation is recognizing Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, by council members Katz, Friedson, and Glass. If everybody who is here for that proclamation could come forward.
Yes, good. Please, everybody, come on down. We're a friendly group. We really are. on most issues, yeah. Okay. Good morning. Good morning and welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's commemoration. I'm being joined by Council Members Friedson and Council Vice President Evan Glass. I would like to invite, and I'd like to thank those who are participating in the presentation to join us, and it's Deb Miller and Julie Greenwald from JCRC. Also we have with us Albert Garay, who's representing the Survivors Group, as well as Manny Mandel, and Edie Tisch, representing the second generation, also known as 2G, groups, as well as Lisa Mandel-Trupp. For those of you who know that Lisa's my chief of staff. And we have Courtney Tisch representing 3G, the third generation. The annual commemoration of the Holocaust, both here at the Council and all over the world, is a somber and necessary event. It is of the utmost importance to recall our shared history, no matter how difficult and painful, so that we learn from it and vow to never repeat it. This year's Holocaust Remembrance Day will be observed on April 28th, and I'm glad that we can actually gather in person today to commemorate this observance. As you know, the Holocaust was a systematic murder of 6 million Jews and other groups by the Nazis and their collaborators. Well, we tend to think about the Holocaust as having taken place between 1941 and 1945. Jews were persecuted by the Nazi regime starting in 1933 when Hitler came to power in Germany. We are fortunate that today we have with us members of the survivor community, the second generation and the third generation. We will hear from some of them in a few minutes, but I may ask my colleagues, Councilmember Friedson, followed by Vice President Glass, for their remarks, and we're going to read the proclamation and then hear from those other speakers. Councilmember Friedson.
Well, each year this is a humbling honor and a somber obligation that we join together to commemorate the Holocaust, and we do it with collective action, and we do it as a community. We do it to say never again, and today we do it with multiple generations. In Hebrew say lador vador, from generation to generation, and this commemoration today is both a reminder of the horrors of the past and a celebration of those who have stood up in perhaps the greatest act of defiance in human history. The idea of generation to the next generation doesn't just happen. And for those who experienced the Holocaust, it wasn't supposed to happen. And so each and every day that the children and the grandchildren and those grandchildren's children live is an act of defiance, is an act of standing up against hatred, standing up against oppression, standing up against genocide. And together, we say never again. Together, we help to make sure that we secure the next generation, and together we can make sure that we stop genocide from happening, we stop oppression from happening wherever it is, to whomever it is happening, wherever on the planet it is happening. So I'm honored to be here today to take place in this. We have to stand up against hate, we have to stand up against anti-Semitism, we have to stand up against bigotry wherever it is, and to whomever it is against. So thank you so much for being part of this important day.
Good morning, everybody. We're here because the Holocaust serves as a stark reminder of what we need to do better, what we need to do right. Here in Montgomery County, here in Maryland, we celebrate our diversity. We love our neighbor, and we cherish everything that comes with it. But unfortunately, the horrors of history tend to repeat themselves, which is why this conversation, this commemoration, is so deeply important. And to hear the stories of those who have been there and heard the stories from their loved ones needs to be a stark reminder and a siren call to all of us that what once happened is possible again. And we need no other reminder than some data that was just released yesterday by the Anti-Defamation League. Across the country, anti-Semitic acts increased 34% year over year. And here in Maryland, as beautifully diverse as we are, as compassionate, as inclusive as we are, anti-Semitic acts increased 17%, which is why we stand here today and say never forget, never again.
Thank you. Andrew, and right behind me there, I couldn't tell. I knew you had my back. I just couldn't see you. This is from the County Council, Montgomery County, Maryland, a proclamation. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945. And while Jews were the primary target, 6 million were murdered, other ethnic and religious groups also were victimized. And
whereas, pursuant to a 1980 Act of Congress, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council designates days of remembrance each year to recall and reflect on the horrific crimes committed during the Holocaust and to ensure that the memory and legacy of lives lost will never be forgotten. And
whereas we have a responsibility to those who perished, as well as to those who survived, to educate current and future generations and rededicate ourselves to the history of the Holocaust and its impact on the world. And
whereas on Sunday, May 1st, 2022, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington will host a virtual community-wide Holocaust Remembrance commemoration, Yom HaShoah, to honor the lives of the 6 million Jews killed and the survivors and their liberators among us, and to call us to mind their courage, forbearance, and strength. And
whereas the memory of victims and lessons of the Holocaust must continue to be memorialized, we must be vigilant in encouraging and supporting future generations to carry the mantle forward, as our ability to learn firsthand from survivors will soon be impossible. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes Thursday, April 28th, 2022 as Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, in Montgomery County. And be it further resolved that all residents are urged to rededicate themselves, to not bear silent witness to injustice, and to always remain vigilant to the principles of a just society, presented on this 26th day of April in the year 2022 by Sidney Katz, Evan Glass, Andrew Friedson, and Gabe Albernaz on behalf of the entire council.
thank you very much. We're now going to hear from Albert Garay, and then Edie Tisch and Courtney Tisch. Please.
Hi, my name is Albert Gary. I was born in France, and I lived through the war as a hidden child. I owe my life to quite a few people who stuck their neck out to help me hide and survive. And I want to thank Andrew Friedson, Evan Glass, and Sidney Katz for inviting me.
We are honored you were here.
Thank you so much, County Executive Elrich, Council President Albernaz, and members of the council. My name is Courtney Tisch, and I am honored to accept this year's Yom HaShoah proclamation on behalf of 3GDC and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors in our region. It is equally an honor to be here with my mother, Eddie Tisch, to represent second-generation Holocaust survivors, as well as the many other 2Gs who are here, and of course, Albert Garay, to represent our Holocaust survivor population. It is critical that the lessons of the Holocaust and its stories of heroism and humanity are passed down. Books, art, and film can convey these stories, but they can never replace those whose families of survivors will forever bear living witness from generation to generation. Grandchildren of Holocaust survivors are stepping up to carry on this important work, engaging in remembrance, talking to students in schools, and advocating against anti-Semitism and other forms of racism and injustice. I want to thank Montgomery County, I'm a proud resident, for its continued support for all of us at 3GDC. We're working year-round to ensure that never again is a promise kept. Thank you.
We're going to take a picture.
If our colleagues could please join us down here.
Thank you all so much for that very moving proclamation. Next, we will have a proclamation celebrating the 75th anniversary of Montgomery College, presented by Councilmembers Rice, Jawando, and Navarro. Councilmember Navarro will be joining us virtually.
So good morning, and as we have our partners from and distinguished guests from Montgomery College join us, I want to welcome our new president of Montgomery College, Dr. Jermaine Williams, who was actually with us for our very first session in his role just yesterday as we approved the Montgomery College budget, and so we're very happy about that. But more importantly, what I think is really something that we need to celebrate today when we talk about, and I love how our proclamations all blend together, we talk about the embracing of diversity, when we talk about supporting, that really is the mission of Montgomery College, and it's been that way since its inception. Since it was created, it wanted to be a place where there was opportunity for all to achieve higher education, to also make sure that whether it was certifications, to be able to ensure that people continued on their pathway of learning, but then also attainment of other kinds of careers. Those were all links. And they were instrumental in terms of what we see today when it comes to our economic vitality, when it comes to our educational success. And I know we have some students with us as well that highlight just that. I'm not going to talk ad nauseum about the college because I do it a lot. I'll just say this, and there's laughter because they know it's true. I have family members who have went to Montgomery College. I myself went to Montgomery College, so I am MC. I proudly wear this purple tie and proudly tell people that community college is a place that can help stabilize you if you are trying to figure out what is next for you. Community college is a great place as an opportunity to start your higher education career, your higher education pathway. oftentimes for those who can't afford it. It's also there not just for those who can't afford it, but for those who it makes it more convenient for as well, who have family situations. A young person who's caring for another loved one in their family who is sick and needs to be their caretaker is a person who utilizes the great opportunities that are at MC. There is no standard student at Montgomery College. That's the beautiful thing. It cuts across all genres. I'll never forget, I was playing golf at Falls Road and was talking to a young man who was a groundskeeper there. And we started talking about some of the things because, I talk too much. And he was talking about what he was doing. And I asked him where he went to school. And he said he went to Whitman. And I said, so what are you doing afterwards? And he said, my dad wants me to go into his business. And I said, oh, what does your dad do? And he said, he's a hedge fund manager. And he said, but I don't want to do that. I really love what I'm doing here, and I really want to do something around that. And I'm thinking about going to Montgomery College and getting some of the baseline courses because I'm thinking maybe one day I'll start my own company that'll contract with a lot of these golf courses that are here in the area. Montgomery College represents something for everyone. And I hope that people understand just how important that is for us and how lucky we are to have an institution like that to where everyone, regardless of their circumstance and background, can come and be served. That is something unique, but that is something that is incredibly important to the fabric of what we call Montgomery County. And so for that, I am so appreciative of the 75 years that Montgomery College has served Montgomery County. And with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Juando.
I'm going to raise this not for me, but for Dr. Williams when he gets here. Good morning, everybody. And it's just great to be here. I've got my purple handkerchief and tie. I've got my colleague, we got double purple. And I am a proud MC student myself, previous semester, Spanish 2, and working my way up. But just, couldn't agree more with my colleague. All of us on the dais have a story about Montgomery College, and that's because it's a staple anchor of our community. I had the pleasure of working in the Obama administration, and one of my jobs was to be the liaison to community colleges. That's actually how I met Dr. Pollard 12 years ago, because she was on doing the circuit of community college talks, and they are in the top 5, I want you to know, in my opinion, of community colleges in the nation. Everyone knows about the great history and legacy of community college. And as Councilmember Rice said, it's for everybody. That's really what America is about, right? A place that you can have opportunity at every level. We have early college students that are going to graduate this year and every year, and that program has grown with a associate's degree and a high school diploma. And some of them are going to are going to go right into Ivy League schools. We've got the student who's working 2 jobs, first generation, never to go to college, who's trying to better their lives for themselves and their families. You see some students behind us, and everyone in between. That is the beauty of Montgomery College, and it's reflective of our diversity. The majority kids of color, majority first generation. That's who Montgomery County is, and that has happened in the lifetime of Montgomery College in the last 75 years. And so as Dr. Williams and his great team are behind us here, and you'll hear from him momentarily, I think Montgomery College is the epitome of what Montgomery County is, a welcoming place for everyone, that it gives people the opportunity to achieve their highest potential. That's Montgomery College, and that's why we all are Montgomery College. So please help us welcome. Do you want to do that first and then do the proclamation, Dr. Williams? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Jermaine Williams, the new president in the 75th year of Montgomery College.
It's good. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the elevator up a little bit. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Juando, Councilmember Navarro, for this fantastic acknowledgement and appreciation and proclamation for Montgomery College. Thank you to all the council members for this opportunity. It's truly an honor for me to stand here with. It's awesome. This is just an example of the awesome faculty, staff, students, alumni at Montgomery College, this exemplary institution that is, as you heard and as we all know, it's an anchor for the community. I'm grateful to the Board of Trustees, again, our students, our faculty, our staff, our council members, our alumni, our donors for putting forth the time, the energy, to make Montgomery College what it is and to advance us into the future, ensuring that students who attend Montgomery College receive what it is they need, right? And as you heard, what it is they need depends on that student and their path and their circumstances. You know, that may be a degree, that may be a certification, that may be a certificate, that could be a early college experience, but we meet the needs of the students in the diverse communities that we serve, and we will continue to do that with distinction, with everyone's support. So alumni are now top executives and decision makers who generate jobs. They are residents who have grabbed a hold of the ladder of opportunity. They are individuals who are now receiving the family livable wage and providing for themselves and their families and the generations to come that they support. They are the skilled talent that helps drive Montgomery County forward. And I will just share a little bit and I'll read a little from my notes. Alumni like our council member, Sydney Katz. So I know you're Julie Verratti, founder of Denizens Brewing Company. Shruti Mistry, biomedical engineer at the Food and Drug Administration. And Josue Chavez, software engineer for Leidos. And Sue Kim, an IT instructor at MC, who has joined us today. Both of them are with us today. So I know with the help of everyone behind me and so many more, the council members behind, beside, in front, from all angles, that we will lead Montgomery College into the next 75 years, using this first 75 years as a catapult, as a lever, as a fulcrum, to make sure that we continue to advance the county. So thank you again, council members. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Dr. Williams. And I apologize ahead of time to our council president, but I do want to turn just very quickly to our students. Just very briefly, just tell me about what Montgomery College means to you, because I think it's important. This is the 75th anniversary, and I think it's most important to hear from our students about what Montgomery College means to you. So,
okay, so yeah, my name is Nana Sarkoti. I'm currently a first-year student at Montgomery College, and I'm majoring in biological sciences. One of the biggest things I've learned from Montgomery College that I appreciate is the accessibility to professors, just their patience and being able to access them. I feel like that's something that's not typically offered at maybe like a traditional college, but being able to work closely with the people who are teaching you, just be able to build those type of communications and relationships. I think that's really been helpful, and that's actually why I'm here, because the faculty that the professor I had worked with, she let me know about this opportunity. So that relationship, I think, that we develop with our professors, I think that's really unique to Montgomery College.
Hi everyone, my name is Josue Chavez. I am an MC alum 2016, which feels like an eternity. But what MC means to me, it means it's one of the smartest decisions that I made, because I didn't have to commute to another school. I didn't have to pay out-of-state tuition, so it was very affordable, and I got to be in classrooms that were very, smaller than traditional universities, but getting that same amount of experience, that same amount of knowledge. Like my friends mentioned, the relationships with the professors were so great. I remember a professor giving me mentioning an opportunity to intern at NIST, which is right down the street. And I initially was hesitant to take the offer because I thought to myself, well, it's NIST, it's very hard to get in. But she was very persistent and very suggested that I apply, and I came in with the mentality, with the worst thing being said, the worst option being no, I get rejected, but I still applied, and then I got in, and it definitely launchpad my career to where I am right now, and definitely Montgomery College has influenced how I to where I am right now. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity.
Hi, my name is Danilo Kili, and I'm international student here. So Montgomery College means to me that opportunity that I can have a higher education here in the U.S. and from another country. So opportunity is the word for me.
Hello everyone, my name is Swetsa Shrestha. I'm a first-year student studying information sciences and systems, and Montgomery College just means opportunities to me. The different organizations and programs that we have at college to develop leadership skills and be involved in student life, that just has enhanced my college experience a lot. So, and I also want to thank the council for funding and supporting MC. Thank you.
I know you guys were students at one point.
I do want to, but I do want to acknowledge we've got Margaret Latimer, Vice President Provost with the Germantown campus. We've got Steve Greenfield, who's with us, who's Workforce Development and Continuing Education. We've got Brad Stewart, Vice President Provost, and of course, Dr. Williams. And let me just say that again, and Sue Kim as well. And Kelly, I'm sorry. Kelly, I'm sorry, Kelly, I'm reading Kimberly Kelly as well, Vice President Provost of our Rockville campus. Let me just say that as we close and about to read the proclamation, there's some amazing things. And so this is a teaser for the millions that are watching at home. There's some amazing things that are happening at Montgomery College. And I will share with you that in a couple weeks, we're going to make a grand opening on Montgomery College's Rockville campus of the brand new Ignite Hub, something that I encourage you all to read up on. This has been one of the best kept secrets in Montgomery County, a partnership with a very large computer company who I cannot mention at this point, but hopefully will at some point very soon, and really spearheaded by some great folks within leadership at Montgomery College, including Dr. Sanjay Rai and Steve Greenfield. So I am so appreciative for what this represents in terms of opportunity, as we've heard from all of our students about what is still to come and how Montgomery College will continue to lead for another 75 years here in this community and well beyond. So with that, Councilmember Joanda, are you ready? All right. Whereas Montgomery College was founded in 1946 with classes held in the basement of Bethesda Chevy Chase High School and has since grown into Maryland's largest community college, serving a diverse student body of nearly 43,000 per year from 155 nations. And
whereas the Montgomery College campus spans across Montgomery County, from the Germantown Bioscience Education Center to the Rockville Godolsky Center and Ignite Hub in the future Tacoma Park Silver Spring Catherine and Isaiah Leggett Math and Science Building, in order to provide state-of-the-art facilities to all residents. And
whereas the innovative partnership between the Pinckney Innovation Complex for Science and Technology and Holy Cross Germantown Hospital, the first U.S. hospital built within a community college, has enriched Montgomery College's health sciences and nursing programs and spurred economic investment in local businesses as both a regional institution strategic enterprise zone and an opportunity zone. And
whereas students can choose from 144 degrees in credential programs. Can you name all of them, Dr. Williams? Okay. Including early college, online degrees, certification courses, along with short-term training programs that prepare graduates to earn a baccalaureate degree or join the labor force as a skilled worker and well-rounded scholar. And
whereas Montgomery County has flourished thanks to Montgomery College's educational and career offerings for residents of all ages, including pathway programs in partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools and the universities of Shady Grove, truly becoming a community that welcomes diversity of thought, spearheads progress in every sector, and ignites the local economy. And
whereas Montgomery College and Montgomery County has stayed true to its mission for 75 years as an affordable post-secondary educational institution that empowers students to pursue their passion, responds to the needs of the community, and ensures widespread access to knowledge and economic mobility.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby celebrates the Montgomery College's 75th anniversary and its enduring impact on the residents of Montgomery County, presented this 26th day of April in the year 2022. Signed by our council and our council president. Congratulations, Montgomery College.
All right, thank you all very much. That takes us to our third proclamation and final proclamation this morning, and that's a proclamation recognizing National Therapy Animal Day, presented by Council Vice President Glass. Would everyone who is here for that proclamation please come forward?
If my two-legged and four-legged friends could please come on down for a light-hearted way to end our morning of proclamations.
Can't go wrong there.
Yeah, he would be going nuts though. So he's not trained as a therapy dog.
Okay. It is a menagerie this morning at the council. Hi, welcome. So we are all here to recognize National Therapy Animal Day, which was started by Pet Partners, a national nonprofit, a number of years ago. And we have a number of different organizations with us today who are really helping provide some love and support for residents in need here in Montgomery County, and you're going to hear from them in a few seconds. But this is also the 40th anniversary of People Animals Love, one of our wonderful organizations here, otherwise known as PAL, which I think is a really appropriate acronym. And before we hear from them, I'll just share with you that animal therapy has been known to really help people and help people heal, help people emotionally cope. And the science is there since the 1700s. So we've known that animals not only, and dogs are not only our best friends, but they really do help us. And for so many people over the last 2 years during the pandemic, getting a pet, whether it was a therapy dog or just a normal dog or pets, has really helped them cope with the social, emotional, and also economic anxiety that so many people felt. Now, normally I would love to bring my two rescue beagles here, Daisy and Percy, but they are under no means therapy dogs or well-behaved. And so I'm glad to know that there are well-behaved dogs here. And now we're gonna hear from a few of the owners, trainers, and organizations. First, I'd like to invite up James Haworth, the Executive Director of People Animals Love, and I know that Heather Gomes and Allison Putnam is here with Dolly, and David Fenstrom is here with Bailey. So if you all want to come up and just say something, or not?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilmember Glass. We're really excited to honor the work of therapy animals in Montgomery County. You know, these gentle, friendly creatures with their gentle, friendly people are busy around the county. They encourage students at Montgomery County Public Schools. They listen to young readers at Montgomery County Public Libraries, bring comfort to residents of our hospitals. They bring joy to the residents of our retirement and nursing homes. They bring hope to inmates out at the correctional facility in Boyd's, and through partnerships with Montgomery Hospice and the Jewish Social Services Agency,
they visit with hospice patients in their last weeks and months of life. And so, yeah, we're just excited, and we thank you for your support. I can introduce the dogs, or we can have them introduced by their people.
Well, I have the list, so we'll do that in short order, but thank you so much, James. Also, we have Alicia Harvey here's with Anna, and she is with Pets on Wheels. Oh, you want to?
Sure. Come here, Anna. Come on, Anna. She's kind of lazy.
That's okay.
It's a breed. This is Anna, and Anna actually is a rescue from Harbin, China, and we had her flown in through Delta Airlines 2 years ago, right before the pandemic, and she was very fearful and very shy, and right now, after 2 years of training and socializing her, she has blossomed into this beautiful dog who is wonderful with hospice patients, assisted living, children who don't like to read. She works at the library, and most recently she has worked at the Montgomery County 911 call center. So we had a very interesting evening with Anna and all the police folks. So we're very grateful that she's a great dog, can take her anywhere. She's still shy, but she's a fantastic companion. So we're very proud of Anna.
Well, Anna has made herself very comfortable here, so welcome home, Anna. Also, I'd like to introduce Burton and Shelley Goldstein with National Capital Therapy Dogs, and they brought Bear and Emma.
Good morning. Thank you all. This is Bear. This is Emma. We, through National Capital Therapy Dog, visit many critical care facilities, programs at various hospitals, work with schools. These are all pet therapy. They're predictable, they're repetitive events. We also put on a different green vest, and we work with HOPE, Animal Assisted Crisis Response, where we go out to do non-predictable, non-repetitive events. The Washington Navy Yard shootings. We've been going out to the various schools where there have been suicides, and we'll go in with a class the next day. So through crisis response work, we do a lot of work over and above the typical pet therapy. But it's all good. It's all dogs and the human bond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then finally, we'd like to introduce everybody to Rick Yount with the Warrior Canine Connection, which I've had the pleasure of seeing in action with some folks. Is Rick not here? Oh, Rick, right here, of course.
Yeah, hi. Rick Yount, Warrior Canine Connection. Sorry, I think it was last year about this time we were over at the in Olney, visiting with the nurses with some of our puppies. We breed golden retrievers and labs for service dog work, and then use the training of the dogs as a therapeutic intervention. And we're very proud to call Montgomery County our home headquarters for Warrior Canine Connection. You know, we've served close to 6,000 veterans now to date, and work around the country at DOD and VA hospitals and within the community and veterans treatment courts, and actually name our puppies after veterans and fallen warriors, which has become a very important part of our healing. You know, the nurses, we're looking forward to heading over there again in another week for Nurses Day with some of our young dogs, and just anything we can do. Our tagline is serving humankind for 30,000 years, and I would say that this intervention is older than acupuncture. So, so just grateful to be here. Thanks for all the council's support for what we do.
Thank you.
And Cooper.
Thank you, Cooper. Okay, well, so now I'm going to read the proclamation, but I think, you know, what is really important is you heard the integration of this of all these organizations and how they really help everybody throughout our community, throughout all the sectors, and you know, we could all use a little more love these days, and the unconditional love that these dogs provide is really necessary to heal us all after what we've been going through lately. So, the proclamation from the Montgomery County Council, whereas therapy animals play an essential role in improving human health and well-being through the human-animal bond, and hundreds of therapy animals serve residents across Montgomery County. And whereas People Animals Love, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary, and nonprofits such as Alliance of Therapy Dogs, Fidos for Freedom, Hero Dogs, Hope Animal Assisted Crisis Response, National Capital Therapy Dogs, Pets on Wheels, Pet Partners, and Therapy Dogs International provide therapy animals in Montgomery County. And whereas therapy animal teams make thousands of visits per year to hospitals, long-term care facilities, retirement homes, schools, mental and behavioral health facilities, correctional facilities, and homeless shelters to assist residents with various needs from post-traumatic stress disorder to acute anxiety attacks. And whereas these exceptional therapy animal partners with their human companions do bring comfort and healing to those in need, and we honor that work. And whereas Pet Partners, a national nonprofit, has designated April 30th as National Therapy Animal Day, now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes the 30th day of April as National Animal Therapy Day, presented on today, the 26th of April, by me and Council President Albernaz and all of my colleagues. So I'd like to invite everybody on down so you get to enjoy the unconditional love of these beautiful dogs.
All right, we will go ahead and get started with our full council agenda today. And thank you all so much for joining us. I'm missing my dog Coco this morning. And thank you to my colleagues for those important proclamations. So want to take a point of privilege this morning. We had a very important transition on the council recently, and the Selena Singleton, who has been doing an outstanding job as the clerk of the council for the last several years, especially during the pandemic where we had to adjust. And as I like to tell people, she could be playing for the Nationals right now because she's learned how to hit so many curveballs. We really want to thank Selena for her extraordinary work as the clerk of the council and congratulate her on recently being named as the Racial Equity and Social Justice Manager, and will continue her outstanding work on behalf of all of our residents here in Montgomery County. So please give Selena a round of applause. And of course, that means it gives me great pleasure to introduce Miss Judy Roop, who is now the new clerk of the council. Judy is a University of Maryland graduate, which, as we all know, is the greatest school in the history of the United States of America and the greatest school in the galaxy. She also comes to us most recently having served as the court administrator for Montgomery County Circuit Court. Ms. Roop, we are so delighted to have you join our team. You've already hit the ground running, and although you officially started a month ago, this is your first formal session serving in this new and critically important position. We look forward to working with you, and welcome.
Thank you.
I'll also just note quickly, colleagues, that Councilmember Navarro will be joining us virtually today. And so that moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is, Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda changes or announcements?
Good morning, Council President, Council Vice President, Council members. The announcements of the agenda and calendar changes begin with a correction to the approval of minutes. We will be approving March 25th, 29th, April 4th, and we will be approving the closed session minutes for February 1st, all in 2022. We have deleted an item, which is a supplemental appropriation 2282 to the FY22 operating budget, Montgomery County Government, Department of Transportation Fuel Relief Disbursement, Transportation Services Improvement Fund for $75,000. We have rescheduled item F, which is an action extension of time until November 29, 2022 for council consideration of Executive Regulation 1521, Office of Racial Equality and Social Justice Action Plan. And we have added two items. The first is an introduction of a special appropriation to the FY22 operating budget, Montgomery County Government Department of Health and Human Services, $1.2 million for adult medical daycare, COVID assistance. The source of funds is federal grant, American Rescue Plan Act. The lead sponsor is the County Council. There will be a public hearing scheduled for May 3rd at 2022 at 1:30 p.m. We've also added the introduction of a special appropriation to the FY22 operating budget, Montgomery County Government Department of Recreation, $112,500 for out-of-school time systems building, and the source of funds is the General Fund Undesignated Reserves, an amendment to the FY22 operating budget resolution 19-872 Section G, FY22 designation of entities for non-competitive contract award status, Montgomery County Collaboration Council for Children, Youth, and Families. The lead sponsor of this is the Joint Planning, Housing, and Economic Development and Education and Cultural Committees. And the public hearing for that is scheduled for May 3rd, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. Now I'd like to acknowledge the following petitions that were received. There is a petition from residents of Montgomery County opposing Bill 4921, Police Accountability Board, Administrative Charging Committee established. And the second petition we received was the petition from residents of Montgomery County supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color and low-income communities are given proper time and resources to review and co-create Thrive Montgomery 2050 plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The clerk has circulated the minutes of for our meetings on March 25th, 29th, and April 4th, as well as the closed session minutes from February 1st. Are there any changes? Hearing none, those are approved. And now we move on to the second item on the agenda, which is a work session to discuss the Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities Plan. We are being joined by council staff, and I will turn it over to the chair of our Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, Councilmember Reamer, and colleagues. Councilmember Reamer will take the lead on the back and forth with Ms. Dunn and staff, and if you'd like to speak, let me know. Text me, and I will intercede and let Councilmember Reamer know that somebody has a question or a comment. But to make this go efficiently, I think that's the best way to do it. So with that, Chairman Reamer.
All right, great. Well, this is our second session to continue our review of the Silver Spring Downtown and Adjacent Communities Plan, and we're going to get into the substantial pieces of that plan today. I won't belabor it, but I think the big picture, what you'll see today is that the committee wanted to craft a plan that would be simpler, more transparent, where the private sector would be able to know more in a more straightforward manner what it would take in order to proceed with development. And so that is kind of the foundation that that guided the decisions around some of the mechanisms for how density and height were proposed to have been allocated
and how they are now proposed to be allocated through the committee plan. We're going to take up some proposals today around affordable housing. The committee had a very substantive deliberation about how to approach some parts of the downtown area that have been long-standing market affordable housing units. In fact, we learned that these units have been, today, are about 50% AMI. These are market rent communities, which is very interesting, perhaps less uncommon than we think. And so we crafted a careful plan about how to address that. There were, dissenting views on different issues, and we'll bring those forward. And we addressed some of the hot button issues I think we'll get through today, like the future of Newell Street, which is one that the community cares a lot about. And of course, again, we addressed the question of whether surrounding neighborhoods would be rezoned or in what manner. And as I've said previously, this plan recommends a very, very targeted approach to that issue, and the committee endorsed that. The committee agreed with the recommendations for several locations that are right next to the downtown, where we felt like there was an historical anomaly in how that built environment has arisen through time, and it could be improved with a revision to the zoning. So we'll, I'm sure, review that today. So as the council president said, we'll turn it to Pam and to LeVue, and they'll walk us through, and I'll try at times to bring out some of the, just bring out a little bit more of commentary, but staff has done a terrific job through this packet and through this process, and we're really grateful for staff's recommendations, and they're working so effectively with us at the committee. And so without further ado, I will turn it to Pam and LeVue. And I don't think we're getting to transportation today. That will be a future session. We're not finishing this plan today, to be clear, for those watching or seeking to participate. There were some major transportation elements, and we'll come back to those. We'll get to those at a subsequent session. So, okay, great. Pam.
Great. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start off. The staff report does walk through today for the council several of the what are called plan-wide recommendations. You recall last week at your work session you covered all of the 8 districts. Those were targeted recommendations for each district. But today we're going to start off with the broader recommendations, the concepts, the things that the plan is presenting related to land use and zoning, economic growth, housing, urban design, and if we have time, parks and public spaces. We'll try to get through all of that today. Chair Reamer is correct. You have one more work session on this. This will be next Tuesday. We will cover transportation at that work session. We'll cover any other plan-wide recommendations and implementation issues. And again, any follow-up. So anything that the council as a body still wants to talk about, that's available for next Tuesday as well as a work session. The broader process then is, after these 3 work sessions are done and the council has weighed in on their thoughts on the committee's recommendations, we will bring back to the council a draft resolution of all the changes that are made from the planning board draft that now becomes the council's vision of the plan. And that will hopefully be approved at either the 17th or the 24th, one of the work sessions or one of the council sessions later in the month of May. You do know that we do need to get the sectional map amendment completed in a timely fashion for the fall due to the election year deadline. So that just to give everyone an overview of what's expected in the next couple weeks. On the second page of the staff report, we start with land use and zoning. And there are a couple broad concepts that this plan introduces related to land use and zoning. Just to set the stage in the plan, very few properties were awarded additional density. The idea being that they had density that was sufficient, and the plan was then, the zoning was then changed to provide about 20% additional height for all properties. Currently, a lot of the CBD properties, during the translation zoning, during the rewrite, were given what was a T added to them. It would provided some flexibility and additional height that the old CBD zones allowed under their text, not text carried through in the way that the CRs operated. So that was put on as a T, and then as master plans get done, they typically remove that, put on CR zoning with a little more height to accommodate what that quote T was doing it as it translated a strict translation from CBD zones. So that's a high picture of that. So you're looking at a plan where the properties didn't, as a whole, get more density. They got additional height. And one of the broader pictures, one of the things you've seen in every one of the districts was the equalization of commercial and residential zoning to each other. So you know that CR has a total FAR, commercial FAR, and residential FAR that are mapped per the property. This plan says that total FAR will equal the commercial allowance and the residential allowance to allow for perfect flexibility for the market to determine how best to use the total density on any property moving forward in the next 20 years. And this plan sets up two other things, as we just mentioned. One is this, it's called the plan terms that a connectivity and infrastructure fund. The idea behind that is for properties that either can't reach their mapped height with the density that's mapped to their property, or if they're in a height incentive area, can't meet the incentive height with the density that they're awarded, they can use the connectivity infrastructure fund to make a contribution and in return get more density. And the council's familiar with this idea. This is very similar to Bethesda, right, where in Bethesda additional heights were awarded, density not, and then the park impact payment was set up to really facilitate allowing more density on a property-by-property basis with a contribution to the park impact fund. And this is similar. The fund in this case isn't directed just at parks, but as the plan outlines, it is really directed at what they're calling community or civic improvements. On the second page of the staff report lists the way that the plan itself defines this connectivity infrastructure fund, and it lists the elements that the plan puts forward as components of this fund. And the committee spent quite a bit of time on this. They talked about how the fund should be structured, what it should be called, and what the fees should be. So I provide information in your staff report on Bethesda because I do think it sets a context for that the council has a plan that is similar to this and sets the stage for it. And on the bottom of the fourth page is the committee recommendation to support the idea of this density fund. And again, to recognize the flexibility in commercial and residential zoning.
Quick comment here. So today, a private, someone proceeding with a project, they may not have enough density today. And what they do is they typically purchase it, I believe, right, from other private property owners who have density that they don't plan to use. So there is a private market, which I'm told is not super functional. It's challenging to find property owners who are willing to give up their future development rights. And so one of the great things about this plan is that it doesn't try to figure out what is the best density for every single property in Silver Spring, because that's just a difficult thing to actually know and to predict. And so rather it just leaves density and says, let's create a clean marketplace that is very efficient so projects can come in and purchase their density from the county. And so the key question is at what price, and the committee has a recommendation there. But again, I think what this is going to do is it's going to make it much more practical to proceed with projects, because you don't have to spend months or even years trying to find property owners who are willing to provide you with the density to proceed to the height that we want you to proceed to, which is kind of the core of it. We want you to do tall buildings in downtown Silver Spring, but we need to make sure that you are able to do that. And so that's what this mechanism is intended to do.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. Well, you've now confused me.
Uh-oh.
Are you saying that every property owner could sell their density and then not use their property for that density?
Well, that's
I mean, I
existing.
understand for transfer development rights. There's receiving areas and there's sales, and there's some concern about whether or not there's enough sales for that. But are we suggesting that every property owner could sell their density to their next door neighbor and never use their property?
That's true now under the CR zones.
Current law.
Pretty much all the CR zones. So White Flint, for example.
Yes.
Property owners can transfer density. We made it easier to do that in Bethesda, and now that's routine in Bethesda. So this is basically, you might think of this as the BOS 2.0 or BOS Lite, because it doesn't include some of the requirements that we included in Bethesda in light of the different market conditions, but it's essentially the same concept that people can. Now, the limiting factor is design review. So instead of the basic concern about excessive, I guess you'd say, if you want to think about it that way, FAR on a site in relation to height, you don't want to see a giant box. The way to constrain that, and this worked very, I think, by almost every account successfully in Bethesda, is you can get your mapped height, you can get the FAR either from a neighbor or from the density pool, and the constraint on what you can build is design review. So we're trying to make sure we get quality projects that are not oppressive to their neighbors or to the public realm, but FAR is no longer the tool that we're using to constrain the massing, bulk, architectural details of the project.
It's a good follow-up. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, and for the floor area ratio, the FAR, so you're saying that an organization, a property owner that sells their density, and then do they have to have that property be green space? What happens to that property?
No, if I could just step in, the existing CR zoning has some very specific constraints for what is called density averaging. It has to be within a quarter mile. It has to be two property owners that agree. They both have to do site plans to document the density averaging that takes place. But what it means is that if someone is transferring density from an existing property, it's usually not an empty lot. It's usually a smaller building that they don't plan to redevelop at the moment, but that has additional density associated with it through its zoning. They can sell that density to an not adjoining, but within a quarter mile property, and then that is the way it stays thereafter. That property that sold their density no longer has that density to use. If they decide at some point in the future that they do want to redevelop their small building, they only have the amount of density that they retained to do that redevelopment. But it's all done on a market basis. This has been actually in place since we did the Woodmont Triangle amendment to the Bethesda plan many, many years ago.
Before my time in this group, yes.
And there had been, even before the most recent Bethesda plan, this kind of density averaging going on amongst property owners. What happened in the Bethesda plan, because it was really difficult, people were finding the process challenging, is that we created this pool of density in the Bethesda overlay zone so that people still have the opportunity, if they want to work with a nearby property owner, to make this kind of transfer, but they also have an ability to get an allocation of density from this pool. And that would be exactly the same situation in Silver Spring. It would be identical to the situation in Bethesda, except that the cost per square foot of density for an allocation would be less than Bethesda, and it would be not devoted to parks, which is what the Bethesda money was going to be devoted to, but it would be devoted to a list of projects that are on page 5 of your staff report that have to do with connectivity and infrastructure.
In the pool, do they sell their density to the pool? How do you get in the pool?
Well, the pool of density would be operated by the government. It would be density that would be allocated through the development review process. So it's like every property owner has two choices. They can go through the government and get density from this pool, or they can go to one of their nearby neighbors and purchase density from a neighbor who may be willing to sell density. And so those options still exist they still exist in Bethesda, and they would still exist in Silver Spring. But it would be two separate options for each property owner. And honestly, our experience in Bethesda is that they've generally gone to the government pool because the working with a nearby property owner has been difficult and more expensive.
And the nearby property owner can't use their property to the degree that someday, I mean, the fact that you don't want to use it today,
Right.
20 years happen, we all know 20 years happens pretty fast.
Right. So many people don't want to sell their density or enter into a private agreement with their neighbor. So that's one of the reasons that density averaging provision is so difficult. It's not easy to find someone.
Thank you.
Councilmember Friedson wanted to chime in.
Yeah, this makes it much simpler, to be able to buy your density the way that we have. I mean, essentially, if we want tall buildings near Metro, that's the desired outcome here. We want redevelopment. We're providing that. But in order to maximize, as council staff said, in order to maximize your height, you need more density. The question is how much more density. It's a very complicated process to go project by project and determine who needs what density, and this will allow a more efficient market-based solution. It's essentially like saying, we're giving you a bigger jar and we're charging you for the jelly beans. The jar doesn't matter. It's the jelly beans to fill the jar that matters. So before we were charging you for the bigger jar and we were charging you for the added jelly beans. So essentially it's the same thing, because in order to maximize the height, you need to get additional density, or else you're not going to be able to achieve that height.
Thank you for clarifying with the jelly beans. I don't know that it makes it simpler, candidly.
Maybe we should call it the J-BOZ for the jelly bean overlay zone.
All right. Okay, great. So this is a innovation in the plan, that we are not trying to prescribe density on a property by property basis that much, but rather creating a market that will be efficient, so a property owner can know there's a way for them to get what they need. As Casey said, it's important to qualify that by saying that the constraint will be the design. And so it's not just anything goes, it's you can get what you need to build a really great project. Okay, Pam.
Good. So if you look on page 5, the next place where the committee really focused was then on what fee should be set to actually make a contribution in return for this density, for this additional square feet. Silver Spring is not Bethesda. This is crafted like Bethesda, but the market isn't as strong as Bethesda to be paying fees. And so they spent quite a bit of time talking about what makes sense. And you have a summary of that at the top of page 5. But where the committee landed in a 2-to-1 decision was that the fund would be set with a $3 per square foot fee for non-residential development and a $5 per square foot fee for residential. Councilmember Friedson was dissenting on this, and he had proposed a different bifurcation of the fee, which would be $1 per square foot for non-residential, recognizing the weakness of the job market in Silver Spring, and a residential fee of $4 per square foot. And if the committee wants to chime in about that discussion.
Can I just ask, did you discuss jelly beans at that time as well? Yeah.
So, hard to know what the right answer is here. I think we're all making a best decision about what the market can bear without being too much and getting maximum. So if others wanted to go in a different direction, that would be their prerogative. And the committee's recommendation was 2-to-1 here.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I think it's just important that we discuss, have just a quick overview of it. I mean, essentially, the question, there's 2 questions after we made the decision of changing slightly how we were going to handle the SIF in general and deciding how to pay for it or what to pay for. And the first question was whether we bifurcate at all. We decided to bifurcate with the understanding that the commercial market is much weaker than the residential market, which there was agreement there, and that's important to note, I think. And then the question is, what is the amount that can be sustained without preventing projects from happening, I still think that $3, if you look at the staff analysis from the committee report, the number of decades that it would take to address some of the office vacancy challenges in particular at $3 a square foot, that's still a major inhibition, and that's still a major prevention to it, because it's an added cost, and cost is the challenge here. So I had proposed $4 for residential, $1 for commercial, but I think it's up to the full body and the council to decide what's the right number. Of course, there's always a balance. This money is going to pay for things that are good for the community and things that are generally good for growing the economy. But ultimately, if you overcharge and a project doesn't happen, then you're going to get nothing. So the question is, where do you find that balance? I would say I don't think this is a huge disagreement, like a vehement disagreement. I think we largely landed in a similar place. It's just a slight disagreement on what is the number that can be sustained by commercial and residential properties. But that's why I landed where I did. And I think if there's interest of other folks to discuss this further, I think we ought to.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you. I just wanted to give the full context here from my perspective, and I think I appreciate staff. They did a good job in the packet. I think capturing it for the discussion. It's always hard when we're going back and forth, especially the Fed committee. So, the analysis from planning, which was well done, and I got a chance to have a deeper dive with the folks they brought in to do the analysis, which I appreciated. Showed that in the Silver Spring market that they could sustain a $10 per square foot charge. Now you can argue, there's an old saying, everyone can get their own report, but I'll just remind this body that normally, I think planning does a really good job of being pro-development in as far as what they try to push. And so if they, as far as a perspective, and it does a really good job of getting people in that can do a good deep analysis. And so I actually would have preferred a higher amount. We landed, the compromise of the committee at 2-1 was the 5 and 3, which is lower than what I think can be sustained based on based on the analysis that was done. And this goes into a fund that pays for infrastructure. If we talk about development, the number one thing I hear as a member of Fed, and I know council members here, is that how are you going to pay for the infrastructure? How are you going to pay for the amenities around it? What's going to happen? And that's why I'm supportive of the Connectivity and Infrastructure Fund, the CIF, right? And we'll talk about the biz, and I think it was a good idea. So I just wanted to frame for my colleagues that I think the compromise position is the 5-3. So I would be very worried, and it's supported by the data. So I don't know, and I won't talk for Councilmember Katz, but we were just talking about how it would be implemented, and I wanted to make sure I was right about this. That I didn't whisper to him something that wasn't true. Would the numbers, whatever they are, and now they're 5 and 3, be in the master plan, or do we have to implement it through a ZTA? That's right.
And the great thing about that is, and I just think this bears emphasis, that's correct, and that's really helpful because you can change it. You don't have to wait 20 years to do new master plan. So obviously we want to get this right, but market conditions change, circumstances change. If it turns out that the number needs to come up or down, that can be accomplished. It's not a trivial thing to change the ZTA, but it's a whole lot easier than doing a new master plan. And that's one of the reasons why this mechanism, I think, has an appropriate degree of flexibility without just being a completely open-ended thing that can change it shouldn't be changed every day, hopefully not every year, but you can adjust it if it turns out
after
that
you get some analysis.
Yeah.
And Ms. Dunn, you were going to say the process for what would be in the master plan, just to make sure that.
Correct. The master plan is the vision for the use of this concept. So it will talk about the fact that there's the fund. It will talk about the things, the types of projects that it would support. So that, and we're going to have that conversation next. But that part is in the plan, but it's not prescriptive. It doesn't list every single thing that would be funded by this collection.
Thank you. So I would just urge that we stay with the committee recommendation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Just one additional item, well, actually two. One, there was an outside analysis that the private sector did with actual projects, and they found, that the number would be much lower of what could be sustained and actually be viable for projects to move forward. We could, decide who's right, who's wrong, obviously, but I just think it's important for context to include that. And I think the other context that's important is other policies that we've done. We don't charge impact taxes in Silver Spring specifically because we think that the market is not as strong as it needs to be in order to get the type of development that we want. And so, I think it's an important context here. We've made that commitment. We have, made that policy decision. We have sustained that policy decision. And so to add fees after we have taken away fees specifically to try to incentivize development, I just think it's an important bit of context. But ultimately, again, I don't think we're that far off here, just a slightly different approach to the overarching same idea.
Okay. Please continue.
Okay, moving forward. After having the conversation about what fee should be the contribution made by the development to move forward, there was a discussion about, so what is this civic improvement, community improvement fund? There's a lot of discussion about it, not being called an infrastructure fund, since we don't want confusion that it should look as if it is duplicating any of the efforts that will be made by a future Silver Spring Unified Mobility Program, which DOT is working on and should come very quickly. I think they recognized the issues and concerns with not having it as timely with Bethesda, and so with Silver Spring expect to have it done very quickly. And so this fund should not look as if it is duplicating that. It can't. So the conversation looked at the list. The list you have before you that is in the master plan listed things like a transit center arrival experience, the bridge connection over the metro tracks, public bicycle parking facilities, green loop improvements beyond a redevelopment site, select utility improvements or other projects as identified by the planning board. You also received a letter from MCDOT and from OMB weighing in on this issue, again, citing multiple things, but one was their concern, again, that it not duplicate anything related to the Unified Mobility Program, which is going to be a fee that will be collected instead of local area transportation review. And also basically concerned with how the fund is operated and who has control over the fund. And then the committee did spend some time talking about this. And where they landed was, recognizing the value of the community assets, the community amenities that can help Silver Spring redevelop, not duplicating transportation elements that would be covered by the UMP. And as you look at that list, so like the bridge would not be a transportation item that would be in the Unified Mobility Program, as it is a very large item. And Dr. Orland can speak with that. So that the language that I have on page 6 in the staff report, where I'm talking about what the committee recommendation is, and I say that the fund would not support or would support non-transportation related infrastructure, is a little too strong. It would be changed to say that it would support civic improvements that are capital infrastructure.
Yeah, just as an example, several years ago, we did the Silver Spring placemaking study, which was a really cool process, engaging the community with the county's planners. And one of the ideas that we developed there was this transit arrival experience. And that was present here in this Silver Spring plan too, developed further. The idea being that when you come into downtown Silver Spring, whether you're coming in on a bus or a train or MARC or a bike or however you get there, it could be a lot more elevated, that experience that you have. And so there are many ways that could be addressed, but it would be fundamentally about creating a much more appealing environment for a really critical part of downtown. That could be something that could be eligible for this, the transit arrival experience, without saying what exactly that could be. So I would be a little worried if it would say, as you said, if it was so strict that it's non-transportation related, that might seem to rule that out, and we wouldn't want to rule that out. But we aren't. The key thing is, this is not a fund to duplicate what the urban mobility plan will provide, which is based on fees that are charged, and you can't charge a double fee You can only charge it once.
Correct. I don't know. Ms. Beck wanted to weigh in from OMB, so I just want to give her an opportunity on this front.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate Councilmember Friedson talking about this is sort of a form of extraction in exchange for density. But it is also something you're trying to price so that it doesn't discourage development. But again, where we were coming down was just being sort of uncomfortable with the role that seemed to be being suggested for the planning board to sort of allocate the use of funds as opposed to a more traditional
And we did,
county
didn't we
process.
change that?
Right. The committee's decision was that this would be, yes, a fund. It would be collected, probably a building permit. It would be handled by the Department of Finance, and items that would be funded by this would be approved by the council during the budget process. So it
yes,
remains
we
at the
shared
council
your concern
level.
there. We want the council, which is the entity that sets the fees, to have the fun of getting to figure out how to allocate those. But it'll be a collaborative process with planning, and we know in the end we'll get a pipeline of projects that planning recommends to us and DOT weighs in on, and it'll be made through that. But at the end of the day, it'll be the council that makes the decision.
Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the packet, and I think you enumerated on what some of the connectivity and infrastructure fund projects would be, but the transit center, the bridge, bicycle facilities, the green loop, they are part of an aspirational vision for what downtown Silver Spring and the surrounding community would be. And as we're trying to figure out what the proper balance is between charging for new development and providing the needed infrastructure, right? And we all agree on those premises, that we need the infrastructure, and we're just and the growth associated with it. What is the collective price tag, just so that we kind of understand what the use of the fund is and what we actually would be working toward?
Well, we've tried to be very, very clear that the contributions to the CIF, or Connectivity and Infrastructure Fund, would not pay for 100% of the costs of the projects listed on page 5. The bridge over the CSX tracks by itself could probably be more than $15 million. Each of these projects has a hefty price tag. So this fund would supplement other kinds of investment that need to be made to achieve the vision of the plan, but it would not pay for 100% of those costs. I think the OMB did a sort of general cost allocation of what they thought a number of the large public improvements that are suggested in the plan would cost, and it is in the tens for just these ones listed. It is in, I don't have an exact number, but it's in the tens of millions. And this would not produce that amount of money.
And the flip side of that is that a lot of projects are going to not going to need additional FAR. There are a lot of projects that are going to be able to fill up the box with the mapped FAR they have. So how many projects, how much they'll need is somewhat speculative, inherently speculative. But I think it's just worth remembering, and I think you'll get to this at a future work session, when you have property owners saying, couldn't you bump up my FIR a little bit? Just keep in mind that's coming at the expense of this fund. Now, there's obviously pros and cons to that. There's a balance to be struck, as you've just discussed. But nobody's pretending that this will pay the full freight for all these projects. And just as Councilmember Friedson likes to remind me on the regular, the park payments in Bethesda are not a substitute for the other sources of capital funding for parks in Bethesda. Same thing is true here. This is complementary, supplementary, not a substitute, and we want to be upfront about that. And also just remind you, as you consider other properties, that the more you give, you're essentially taking out of the potential source of additional revenue that the public will not have to backfill.
Sure, and I just want to underscore that point, and I think you phrased it well, Mr. Chair, that we are trying to strike this balance, and that not every project would contribute to the fund, and that ultimately, this would be part of the CIP process or the park CIP or whichever part of county government and funding to help support these projects. But again, they are aspirational, as is this entire plan. Thank you.
Chairman Reamer.
All right. I think we probably have to pick up our pace. So to Pam and Luvu.
Great. Well, the next part of what was covered in the land use and zoning plan-wide recommendations did involve this height incentive area. And as the planning board draft came over, it had recommended further requirements to achieve that height. It was a mapped area in the downtown where height could go up to 1.5 times what is mapped on the property. And the idea being that if the properties contributed to the Housing Initiative Fund or provided more than 15% MPDUs and activated the ground floor, they could achieve this additional height. And as the committee took time to review the economic analysis that was done for the planning department and had a discussion about what these fees should be, and recognized that in Bethesda, again, heights were mapped. Was it really appropriate that in Silver Spring downtown, this market would bear 2 extractions in a sense to achieve the density and the height that was hoped for in the plan, and so decided that they preferred and unanimously recommended that the heights be mapped and that there not be another requirement to achieve that additional height.
Thank you, Pam. I think this was one of the more important decisions we made here, just to create transparency and certainty about your height and hopefully create a clearer path to proceeding and the external perception of the opportunity that is available here. It would be simpler, it would be more defined, and hopefully would support the economic success in the downtown. So please continue.
At the top of page 7, you'll see there were a handful, 5 additional plan-wide recommendations. We didn't spend time on these in committee. I think we've gotten to the end of the work session. But as I reviewed these for council, I realized that the committee has actually seen each one of these recommendations as they appeared either as a district recommendation or something else in the plan-wide recommendations. And they have to do with updating the Fenton Village overlay zone, removing the Ripley South Silver Spring overlay zone, contributions from optional method development for parks in the plan area, and then just basically reiterating that the plan-wide recommendations support the district-wide recommendations on zoning. So if there are any questions to that, I think we finished this section. I'll turn it to Ms. Nadeau to cover economic growth.
So economic growth, which starts at the bottom of page 7 of the staff report. So over the last decade, Silver Spring has seen a lot of growth in residential development, but there haven't been as many new office users despite being near transit and having other amenities. And of course, retailers depend on the office market for a lot of their daytime sales. So the plan envisions creating a premier office market, continuing to grow the unique retail destinations, and having a diverse availability of high-quality jobs. So in addition to the zoning recommendations, the plan encourages converting obsolete office space to other uses, having ground floor uses such as retail incubators and community spaces, as well as creating a minority business designation program and a wayfinding and branding plan that can highlight the different unique multicultural destinations in downtown Silver Spring. So the committee's first recommendation here is to replace the words obsolete office space with vacant space, as well as add language that supports the vision of Silver Spring as a, quote, premier office market. Since if you read through the current recommendations, a lot of them would actually get rid of office space. So just adding language to make sure that we are achieving both of those goals. That's the committee's first unanimous recommendation. The committee also received a letter from the Coalition for Smarter Growth asking for more incentives and programs to develop business. And in addition, copying a recommendation that was actually in the Fenton Village District section that suggests breaking the buildings into smaller parts. So the committee agreed with the latter part of this letter and recommends adding the Fenton Village language. So you'll see the language would read, where feasible and consistent with other recommendations in the plan, new development should be composed of ground floor space divided into smaller components instead of large monolithic structures to allow for small businesses to thrive. So that is the plan-wide economic growth recommendations for the plan. Next up is housing. So housing is at the top of page 9 of the staff report. So as you all know, in 2019, the Council of Governments set regional housing targets, and that same year, the County Council approved a resolution to add 10,000 housing units by 2030. So the plan is working towards achieving that goal by both balancing existing market rate affordable housing with producing new housing. So the recommendations include striving for no net loss of affordable housing, encouraging publicly owned properties to provide up to 30% MPDUs versus the usual requirement of 15, and then providing a wide range of housing types.
At least 30%.
At least 30%. And supporting partnerships to develop more affordable housing as well as permanent housing for the homeless. And lastly, increasing infill housing opportunities. And the committee supported all of those recommendations. But one recommendation is to remove all references to Thrive Montgomery as well as the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative. So this is a recommendation that the committee agreed to across the entire plan. So I'll just mention it once here. The reason being the council hasn't yet passed Thrive and we haven't received the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative, so you don't want to put them in the master plan before we've actually looked at them. In addition, removing a reference to a ZTA that would change the zoning in the R60 zones, again, because that's not a ZTA that the council has actually passed yet. So we did receive some testimony from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs questioning some of the recommendations in the plan, such as whether increased height and rezoning would actually encourage affordable housing. When we talked about during committee, planning asked for more data to support that letter. And then as for the conversation on no net loss, Councilmember Reamer mentioned this earlier. The committee had a long discussion about this. So this is an evaluation of the different garden apartments in the plan area. So if you go to page 11 is where this issue starts. And then on page 12, you'll see a table that lists the various garden apartments that were looked at. So it's the Blair Park Apartments, the Blair Park Gardens, the Eastern Ave Apartments, Rock Creek Springs, as well as the Spring Garden Apartments. So the question here is, if you have these older buildings that were built decades ago and you'd like them to redevelop, to update so people have nicer buildings, you know, nice carpets, good lighting, etc. Will a developer actually be able to do that if you don't provide them more density? The idea being otherwise they're going to provide the exact same number of units and they need to charge higher rent in order to cover all those renovations that they want to do. So this is where the, no net loss housing issue came up. So housing actually and planning provided an evaluation with various calculations, and in the end, what we saw was that in order to have no net loss in affordable housing units, you would have to have both that 15% MPDU requirement as well as an additional 20% rent regulated units, and that would be the only way to make sure that everything stays affordable at the current rates. So the committee discussed this at length and decided 2-to-1 to add language to the plan that would allow these identified properties to achieve increased density through the local map amendment process. That's a process that goes through planning and goes to the hearing examiner and then comes back to council to approve and creates a floating zone. So Councilmember Friedson dissented because the local map amendment process is expensive. It costs additional time, it's additional process, and that can be really difficult for a developer who's trying to create affordable housing. So that's the committee, the 2-to-1 committee recommendation before the council.
Okay, so I'll espouse the views of the majority of the committee, these property owners did not indicate any interest in redeveloping during the planning process. So that's the first thing to just start with. And in fact, the plan seemed to signal some interest in pursuing an historic designation for this part of the downtown. And that was of concern to me. I wanted to see us espouse a vision for this part of the downtown that would embrace housing and housing affordability, but also redevelopment. So secondly, theoretically, the county will take up this plan again in 20 years. And one thing we know about these projects is they take years years to go through a process. And we have no indication that anybody there, wanted to go through that process or wants to go through that process right now. We would already know if they were working on it. So it felt like there wasn't tremendous urgency to provide additional development capacity given a lack of interest that we know is there today. The committee's recommendation was focused partially on opening up the door for a nonprofit to work with the property owners and purchase the property and do a redevelopment. And we have nonprofits and for-profits that will proceed with a local map amendment if they feel reasonably confident in the outcome. And that's really all it comes down to, is if you feel confident in the outcome, you're happy to use it. If you don't, then that's when it gets really costly and expensive. So, I think the committee recommendation is a good way to look at a challenging area of downtown Silver Spring. We've provided for some additional capacity, but in a measured way. There's a vision here of a nonprofit path. It's not the only path that could open up. It's certainly the property owners could proceed as they are. I think, however, I think this moves the ball forward. I'm pleased with this recommendation. I'll now turn it to Council Member Friedson, who will, I'm sure, share his view.
Thank you. Yeah. So there was a disagreement here. I ultimately was more supportive of council staff's recommendation. Council staff really looked at this and addressed two things. Number one, we all agreed that the likelihood is that these would be nonprofit developers that would seek these opportunities if they were going to redevelop. I have real concerns with this adding burden to nonprofit developers whose goal is to create additional affordable housing. There's also a challenge here on the goal of no net loss, where we've been successful, very successful, in no net loss efforts in previous master plans, like in Veers Mill. We have done what council staff suggested. We have provided additional opportunities for particular properties where additional affordable housing could be found. The reason why these are naturally occurring affordable housing is because they're 70 and 80 years old. Ultimately, there are choices that will be made over the next 20 to 25 years, either a lack of investment in the properties and they'll deteriorate, or investment in the properties with no regulated restrictions where the rents are going to rise, and they could potentially rise dramatically, especially if we don't keep up with adding additional units. The overarching question of housing, I'll just note, the previous conversation with the SIF, I had originally proposed that we direct that funding to affordable housing specifically, potentially deeply affordable housing or issues to address homelessness. Ultimately, that wasn't the direction that we decided to head in. But I do think that council staff had a very important proposal. I was more supportive of that. And I'll just note, us adding a floating zone, it's a nice thing to say in a master plan. It effectively does nothing, because the same process for the process for moving forward would still exist. I mean, it's a signal that we would be sending, but it's not achieving making the process dramatically easier. It's not reducing costs to get the type of affordable housing that we would want. It's not creating an added incentive in any meaningful or material way. So my view is if we want to actually achieve the no net loss, then we have to actually do things in the plan that get us there. I think council staff's recommendation was a good one and was consistent with what we've done in prior master plans. The one issue, which I will recognize that all of us face, is that none of the property owners, like in other master plans, were interested. And so planning had a very difficult dynamic, admittedly, and that we're all trying to grapple with, is if you don't have a willing partner, it's hard to come up with any certainty of what is going to move forward. But I would just note, 20 to 25 years is a really long time. These properties are already 70 to 80 years old, and there is absolutely no protections whatsoever to maintain their affordability. And I think we should be doing everything that we possibly can to create the type of protections that we would want. I don't think the floating zone necessarily achieves that. I think council staff's recommendation would have. Thanks.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Joando, but before I do, I have a quick question. Did any of our nonprofit housing partners weigh in on this specific issue with correspondence or comment?
We didn't receive anything in response to the work session work that we've done in the staff reports that were written, but I will just note of one of the 5 property owners that you have on the top of page 12. One of them is MHP, and they did participate in the process, and they did come forward and ask for more density. And so you'll notice that that's the only one that's an outlier that did receive the additional density because they had conversation with planning. Again, they weren't retained at the current R10 zoning, but the rest of these properties are being recommended to be retained at. They're getting a CR of 3.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman Anderson.
Well, we had this long discussion about the pros and cons of LMAs versus master plan recommendations. I don't think we want to rehash that here other than to say I think we need to, the big picture, we need to figure out how to reform the LMA process and the hearing exam. And I don't mean to pick on them personally. They're wonderful people and they try to do their jobs the best we can, but it's too difficult, expensive, and time-consuming to go through that process. And really, that's something we're not going to be able to address in this plan. But I would hope that before I'm done here, we could turn our attention to that because it's a problem for everybody from daycare centers to redevelopment of garden apartments to, and eventually, I would hope we could restore the ability to apply for an LMA for townhouses, which used to be done routinely before the 2013 zoning code rewrite. That's a really important option. It's harder to develop townhouses now because you can't find enough land to assemble to make those kind of projects make sense typically, but I think that we could at least marginally improve our ability to increase production of that kind of housing for which there's a demonstrated demand in a lot of places where I think most people would agree it's appropriate, but that process is just too cumbersome and difficult. So I guess what I'm saying is I think Councilmember Friedson makes an excellent point about how difficult and time-consuming expensive it is. I think that Gwen and others and Councilmember Reamer have made excellent points about the merits of being able to work this out in a more discretionary process at a later point in time and maintain control over it. But the bottom line is we don't really have a satisfactory middle ground between the LMA and specifying at the time the master plan's written what should happen with these properties, and specifically as to maximizing the chance we can achieve this target of avoiding loss of naturally occurring affordable housing while still encouraging redevelopment opportunities in cases that are not only appropriate but really important because, as Councilmember Friedson has pointed out, a lot of these properties are falling apart and it's going to be important to be able to do something different with them in the next 20 years. So that's, I'm sorry that's not more helpful as far as guiding you to the specifics of this. I'm just trying to put out an advertisement here for we should look at this more generally.
Thank you. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you. We had a long debate. Get some popcorn. You could watch this. It was fun. I'll summarize what I think is the most important position and allow Ms. Wright, who has the most experience of anyone in the room with this issue, is that ultimately, as imperfect as the LMA process is, and I agree with Chairman Anderson, if we don't maintain some level of control, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, these most deeply affordable units could have nothing. They could take the height and density and be all market rate, and we can put it in, or other than the 15%, excuse me, that was mentioned. They would not have the same level of no net loss. And I think these are a different category. You know, we mapped height. We did a whole bunch of things that I think are really pro development for tall buildings near Metro, which I'm supportive of, all the things that we did in the previous plan, but these are a special group, and I was not convinced, based on Ms. Wright and the planning staff's analysis of this, that unless we put a process in place where we actually have the leverage, that we're going to be able to ensure that there's no net loss. And I want to just, if briefly, Ms. Wright, if you could comment on why you made that informed assessment here.
Thanks. You know, it is an issue that we have wrestled with since I arrived back here in 2013 and we were dealing with the Long Branch plan and discussions about whether to rezone some of the garden apartments there or upzone them or what we were going to do. We've been wrestling with this issue for a long time. My experience has been that if you rezone a property, and I understand council staff really believes that master plan language can be very directive when a property comes in. My own experience has been that once the zoning is actually applied, even with strong master plan language, it is very, very hard to negotiate for something that's hard to achieve, like no net loss. We might end up being negotiating for slightly more MPDUs or something, but no net loss is a hard thing to achieve. And my experience has been that the way we've been successful has been when we have some leverage. There's been discussion about the Veers Mill plan and the properties on Twinbrook Parkway. The master plan language was very strong and very clear, but the county government had an enormous amount of leverage in that project, and DHCA we have a friend from DHCA here who can talk about that, which is what I think ultimately really pushed that project towards doing no net loss. The projects we've approved in other areas, including Littonsville, where we tried very creative ideas to maintain no net loss. When the applicants have come to talk to us, they've sort of ignored all the language in the master plan and said, let's just rebuild everything. We have had to be very difficult with that and very harsh about saying no, no, no. So I would just say that we've seen with the Forest Glen MHP project, with the project I think that's happening in Long Branch now, where there's also an LMA going on, we've seen great results coming out, and we've been dealing with private nonprofit
Could
partners.
you please stop the side talk, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's rude.
We've been dealing with private nonprofit partners and doing local map amendments that have been successful in actually achieving no net loss. And so we think that this is a great way to actually get to the goal that I think all of us hope for. And I do want to just make a quick note, which was Chair Reamer had mentioned the idea of historic designation. I just want to be clear, the plan never was looking at local designation of any of these properties, but was looking at National Register designation, which requires the owner approval. And the only reason to suggest it was if they did want to renovate the buildings and keep the existing residents there, it would give them some tax credits. So the plan did not talk about local designation, just National Register to help with tax
Appreciate
credits.
that. Thank you. And to your point, last point I'll make, Mr. President, is just the leverage here is the zone. This is what we have. And once we turn it over, we don't have any. And these are special properties, and I know many of them, they are deeply affordable, and we can't lose that deep affordability. 20-year master plan, and let's reform the LMA process. I appreciate the chair bringing that up. Let's work on that too. But I think this is the best where we landed right now, and people know Councilman Reamer and I aren't always on the same page, but I think this is a compromised position, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. I've got Councilmember Rice followed by Councilmember Friedson.
Well, thank you very much, and I've been quiet up to this point, but I think that this is one that, also being from the area and growing up in Silver Spring and knowing these areas, having friends that came from many of these apartments, I do understand the historical nature of the affordability that's here. I also understand that with any redevelopment, whether it's through the LMA process or any other, we will always lose some of that affordability. That's the reality of redevelopment. That's what happens. As I spent some time this past weekend on U Street Corridor and saw what's happened there, I can see, no offense to my colleagues in DC, how maybe it always isn't done correctly in terms of that preservation. So I appreciate the fact of us taking the extra steps that we need to, but at the same time, I also want us to be very cognizant of the fact that it all relates, right? And so I do understand about the time and the process itself and how that impacts whether or not folks can then provide the affordability. It is very clear with some of the other requirements that are in place, whether it's our NPDUs that continue, we've stepped up to make sure that that program is more aggressive. And I would always urge the future members of the council who are coming back to continue to push those goals. There's no reason that 15 has to be the limit, and I know I'm scaring some developers by saying that, but the reality is this, is that, look, we have to make those kinds of decisions, and they're all in concert with our overarching goals of continuing to maintain affordability. So there are other ways in which we can do this and still get at the same thing while not requiring them to go through the LMA process, even though we've talked about fixing it. And so I will say this. We've done a great job of fixing a lot of processes since I've been on this council that have made it easier for folks to deliver affordable housing to our community. We have, and we should be very proud of that. The challenge is where we're going to put our efforts, right? And so if it's spread across the board in terms of fixing processes as well as doing a little bit here and there on the edges, that's fine. But is that enough to get us to where we need to be at this point? I don't think so. I think we've got to be a little bit more aggressive. That's just my opinion as one council member, as a person who's seen this, area change so much in the past 49 years. And so from that standpoint, I really think that, giving the zoning to these additional properties makes sense in the standpoint of, again, having them forward thinking in terms of their approach, in terms of what it is that they're trying to do, while also being mindful of the affordability goals that we have as well. And just having MHP as a partner and seeing the great work that they do and the way that they've been able to do it, it may encourage some of these other owners to partner with other organizations in our community to try and reach those affordability goals. So just my thoughts there. Again, this isn't one that I would fall on my sword over, but one in which I really do think that incentivizing folks to do the right thing and seeking them out as partners to be able to try and achieve this, in my eyes, makes a lot of sense. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson. And then I have a comment.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate the comments here. A couple things. The first is, I really hope that master plan language matters. And I think that we spend a lot of time up here and planning spends a tremendous amount of time. And I would very much hope that if applicants are coming forward with proposals that directly ignore or contradict the master plan, that those are rejected, because there's not really a point of us spending so much time on it. So perhaps, Mr. Chair.
I just want to emphasize, I don't think that Gwen is suggesting that when developers come and say, never mind that language, we're saying yes. I mean, there is no Littonsville project that ignores a master plan recommendation moving forward. So let's just be perfectly clear about that. It is the planning staff's job, it's the planning board's job to apply the master plan, and we do that faithfully whether we agree with it or not, because it does in fact have the force of law, and we take that responsibility seriously. It is true that it puts everybody in an awkward situation. I think all she's suggesting, I don't want to speak for her too much here, but I just want to be clear that all of us collectively at our agency are trying our best to faithfully take the directive that the county council has given us through these master plans and apply it with discipline and in good faith.
But I do think, again, there is a difference between a master plan and zoning. And I'll give you an example. We spent an enormous amount of time talking about the Bethesda plan, particularly along the east side, where it's adjacent to a lot of single-family neighborhoods. And we worked literally property by property in that master plan to talk about the heights and to talk about what would be appropriate heights. If, however, the zoning changed in some way that for other public interests or for other important goals, those heights could be changed, that we would have to follow that, even if the master plan made very, very strong public interest goals about lower heights in that particular part of Bethesda. If the zoning code changed and said those heights could be increased for certain public interest goals, as we would be reviewing a case, we would look at the master plan and say, yes, but the zoning for these public interest goals allows X, Y, and Z.
Well, I do think that that is sort of academic in terms of this discussion, but I think there's different legal views. My own view would be the master plan, where it makes a specific recommendation, is the law. Now, admittedly, the zoning code can be more specific.
Yeah, I just want to stay relevant to this conversation, because I think we've gone off on a pretty bizarre path here. But specifically, the question that we are addressing is the long discussion and about housing and about no net loss of affordable housing and what the best approach is. The suggestion that we get nothing is what happens if we have a floating zone and the floating zone is not something that there is interest from the property owners, and we create a situation where we've added costs to the process, and then the options before somebody are to leave things the same, which, by the way, we have no idea what the incomes are of the people who live in the units. There is no income restriction here. There is affordability here, which means somebody at a certain income could access it potentially, but it doesn't mean that the people who are living there are actually at a level that we deem to be appropriate. So the MHP property, Blair Park Apartments, was rezoned because there was interest, which is terrific. They're a great partner. They deliver affordable housing. Council staff has suggested that their existing units there are 53. Between the regulated affordable units and the 20% rent regulated units, that would be 55 units, more units, which is the definition of no net loss. It's actually +2 there. And so the suggestion is in the other 4 properties that you could do something similar, or at least incentivize something similar. And the concern is if you create a process that makes it more expensive, it becomes more attractive to buy one of these other 4 properties, to invest a modest amount of money, much cheaper than redevelopment, and significantly raising rents to market rate. And that's the real concern that I have. It's if we do nothing here, or we create a process that's going to add expenses, the most likely, the most rational scenario is that over the next 10, 20, 25 years, 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of these properties will be bought by a rational actor that sees an opportunity to freshen up the paint, to replace the appliances, and to charge 20, 30, 40, 50% more rent. And that's what we should be avoiding. And we have to make intentional public policy decisions in order to avoid it. So I'll yield back. That was the discussion, and that's why I dissented on this and think we should go with the original council staff recommendation from committee to rezone the properties to achieve what we're going to get from the MHP property and the others.
Well, thank you, everyone. On a lighter note, I can see why Councilmember Jawando referred to popcorn when having this discussion, and now we've talked about popcorn and jelly beans. So I'm getting hungry, but just a couple of thoughts. Ms. Dunn, I would like for us to follow up with the Montgomery Housing Alliance and just pose this question to them. I very much understand and respect where the staff recommendation and where Councilmember Friedson is coming from in his dissent. I also understand and respect the compromise position raised by the majority of the committee, but I would like to just seek some feedback from on that side of the aisle to better understand from their perspective more information on this. And just for colleagues, as Councilmember Reamer noted, we are going through today's packet. Today is a work session. We, of course, are not taking final votes today, as he noted. There is still another committee work session left with regards to transportation. This is the time for us to ask questions with regards to those committee recommendations as follow-ups so that we will be prepared to vote on this when it comes back before full council. So just for that context. Chairman Reamer?
All right. Again, I just want to reiterate, the choice that we had was allowing for greater density with language that would challenge the planning board to try to negotiate for as much additional affordable as it could get. That was really option A. And option B was provide the density through a sectional map amendment process that will give the planning board more leverage to get density. What the planning board gave us in the first place was don't change it, encourage them to seek a national historic designation that might provide them some tax credits, and we wanted to do more than that. We wanted to encourage development more than that, but we were concerned about providing density that would not be able to maintain affordability. So with these several properties, we thought that this would be an appropriate solution. If there had been a property owner who came in and said, give me 90 feet and 5 FAR and I will give you all of this affordable like we had in Veers Mill, we would have, I'm sure, figured out a model there that would have provided for that. But we don't have that. We have property owners who did not bother to participate, indicating their lack of general interest. And so I think there's an academic nature to this discussion. But we didn't want to just do something that we thought risked the affordability, but at the same time we wanted to open the door for a careful conversation. So that is, we're doing more than the planning board gave us, but not so much as what staff suggested was an alternative, because we were concerned about the ultimate affordability of the development that would arise. So that was the committee's recommendation. Okay. So I think we continue. All right.
So next up is urban design. Urban design is broken into two sections, building form and public realm. So building form is, of course, important to encourage growth in an area. The recommendations are to prepare design guidelines, the recommendations in the plan are to prepare design guidelines that define design excellence, create a design advisory panel for all optional method projects, encourage innovative building form and flexibility, and make new development in the adjacent communities compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So again, we received a letter from Coalition for Smarter Growth noting that design review panels, I'm going to quote here, too often end up prioritizing subjective design opinions of a small set of residents and can lead to slower progress on redevelopment projects beneficial for the community at large. So the committee supported the plan recommendations for building form, but there was a lengthy discussion about design advisory panels. I will let the council know they are used in Bethesda, and planning reported that they are working well there. The committee supported the plan recommendations, but emphasized the need to make sure that there is community participation in those design panels, since their opinions are reported back to the planning board. For instance, for Bethesda, the zoning ordinance specifically requires that at least one person on that panel is a resident of the area. And then the committee also recognized the need to ensure that these panels are made up of diverse individuals. Given the council's work on racial equity and social justice, we want to make sure if we're having this design advisory panel, it actually represents the community, especially, Bethesda isn't Silver Spring, isn't a different area. So making sure that if we're going to keep creating these design advisory panels, they represent the people where these buildings are going to be. So that is the committee recommendation there, and council staff just recommended additional language in the plan speaking to that issue.
Just a quick comment here. I was in one of those brand new buildings in downtown Bethesda last night, and they are extraordinary. And the proof is in the pudding. You really do see some really innovative and exciting designs that have added very much to the skyline, and I think that it is working in Bethesda.
And next is the public realm. So the public realm is defined as all the outdoor space that's publicly accessible. So that's parks, streets, alleys, sidewalks, etc. So the goal is to introduce new public spaces that strengthen each of the districts as well as improve the existing public space. Committee, of course, supports those goals. The recommendations are to implement the green loop concept, which will be discussed next week when we talk about transportation. Encourage temporary plazas and parks, as well as more eateries and streeteries, and to activate spaces with placemaking efforts, and the committee supports those recommendations as well.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to be just very brief, but as the chair of Education and Culture Committee, I really appreciate this language. We just had a meeting with our Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County yesterday, talking about the resurgence of our arts community. It was Councilmember Navarro who actually commented that she ran across something in downtown Silver Spring in terms of some great events that were happening and how it engaged the community and brought everyone together. It is incredibly important, and so to see that language that's there is incredibly important as we talk about not only the opportunities for promoting bringing folks together and the diversity that we have in this community, but also from an economic development standpoint. Folks continue to forget that our arts and humanities and culture are all economic drivers for this county as well. So we're also talking about huge benefits when it comes to employment as well as tax revenue that's coming into this county. So just really want to say thank you for the committee and for the planning board in highlighting this information. It is incredibly important. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So next up is Parks, which I'm going to pass to Ms. Dunn.
Okay, I think we can get through the rest of the packet, which would be great. Keep us on target. We had a work session that was pretty lengthy on the parks, trails, and public spaces. It is a really integral part of this plan. They've created the Green Loop, which is a way of connecting all those public and park spaces to make the downtown more vibrant, to make it green, and to make it a place where people want to be, not just in the commercial spaces, but in these other spaces as well. And so the committee went through several recommendations, and they are listed in your staff report. And they were unanimous on almost everything. You know, there are recommendations related to furthering equity in the provision of parks and public spaces, recommendations related to the Green Loop. They're listed. Recommendations, again, supporting pop-up parks or parks that are temporary in nature but on private property that, again, activate for the community and provide these place-making activities. And then the plan also provides a map showing where all of these park spaces are, these opportunities. That's on page 17 of the staff report. And the plan goes through each type of park type and gives you a notation of where it is located, what district, what size it is, and if it is publicly or privately owned. The committee reviewed all of these spaces, and we're in support of all of them. The places where the committee had discussion, so I think that's relevant for the council here. One of the prominent parks within the downtown is it's a countywide urban recreational park and is Jessup Blair Park. So they did spend some time talking about Jessup Blair, talking about making it an active and destination park for the county. And there was conversation about the Jessup Blair house that exists on that property. The committee and council had received some testimony from people who were concerned. They thought there was a lack of sort of text about the Jessup Blair house, and the committee agreed that they would want to see more text back in the plan, recognizing the importance of renovating and using that Jessup Blair house as a part of whatever happens in downtown Silver Spring, whether it be arts in the park or whatever's designed for that space, but to support that recommendation that the house get renovated.
I just want to add a personal note. A number of years ago, I fought really hard and got money in the budget for renovating that house. We expended several $100,000 of that funding and got the house stabilized. However, that was where it stopped, and I think that some of the funding we had anticipated was then shifted to another historic project that was deemed more timely. So the plan includes a encouragement to complete the job and finish the renovation so that it can be used and to find a great community use for it. And I hope that that will happen very soon. Thank you. No, but that's a good idea. My colleague is suggesting state money would be a great option for this location, and that sounds very correct.
So the other part, the discussion about Jessup Blair Park was all in the realm of being very supportive, recognizing that there is a concept plan currently ongoing for the park. Part of that concept plan was also reviewed with the committee, and the idea being that the concept plan itself would not be in the master plan, but the visions and the ideas for the park space that are represented by that concept plan are things that would be emphasized in the plan. And then the next place that the committee had a conversation that was different than the recommendations in the plan revolved around Acorn Park and Newell Street. And part of that has to do with the shared street status of that area, part of it in what the future use of that might look like or be. I just want to note that on the last page of the staff report on 19, council staff put in that the plan should note the continued use of the park until the Silver Spring Park is up and running. The committee actually decided that that language itself doesn't go in the plan, but they did have that sentiment when discussing it, that they recognize the value of what's happening today. But that language probably isn't appropriate for the 20 to 25 year plan because the Silver Spring Park itself might be up and running in the next year or two. But what they did see there, and Councilmember Friedson was weighed in too, was this emphasis on a pedestrian use and community gathering space for that area. But I'm just going to turn it over to you guys.
Sorry, this is Newell Street we're talking about? Yeah. So we all love Newell Street. It's great and it's well used, and I think it's a great use. Parks Department has purchased a large piece of property there. We're going to build a park right next to it. I think as we proceed, we will re-envision how Newell Street can best be used. One of the things many of us up on this dais have worked on for the last several years is the idea of building a school right there at the Kennett Street building. And the property owner there would very much like to work with the county on an educational facility there. So it would be an exciting addition to that complex to have a park use right there on Newell Street. You could easily envision the kids coming out every day for lunch to sit out there. I mean, in addition to the community use, there's all kinds of possibilities. So, we want to see that continue, and there are any number of different ways that it could happen. Personally, I am partial to the idea of removing the curbs and putting in pavers and street furniture, but we're not settling that here. We're just saying, let's proceed with its current use while we do the new urban park there, and then we'll see everything together in context. And generally, I think we're very enthusiastic about continuing the current use of Newell Street.
I think Councilman Jawando, you wanted to speak on this? No. Okay. Then Council Vice President Glass, followed by Councilmember Hucker.
I support the committee's recommendations. I think they're spot on with the needs of today and the plans that are in this plan for the future with Parks and Rec, and also just want to extend my appreciation for the recommendation regarding the King Street Park, particularly the King Street Community Garden, which I'm proud to say that it was myself and former council member Valerie Irvin who worked together to get that park opened. It is on private property. It was the first public-private partnership to allow the community gardens, and I think we should continue that type of creative strategy moving forward with any of the private landowners, not only in downtown Silver Spring but throughout the county, recognizing that there might be some extra square footage on their property, and particularly as we are building more density, allowing more density, there's more needs for these types of things. So I'm glad that at least the thought is here to support it staying. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been a big fan of this project for, going on 2 years now since we pushed for the closure. We've been advocating for more green space for so many years in South Silver Spring. That growing community really needs and deserves it, and I'm always a fan of building on what's working and what's successful. So I'm certainly grateful to Riamberto Rodriguez and DOT for their closure of Newell Street, certainly to Parks and for all the activation, all the work that you've done to make it such a success, and to secure the NTP space across the street. I'm a fan of doing both. I think as we move forward, being sensitive to the needs of the residents of the Argent Apartments, seems like a detail we ought to work through. I'm grateful to Jacob Newman and Carson Henry, who I know have moved some of the activation space farther away from the park and off that lane recently. But I think it's a great success. I think the community the level of community interest and use indicates the level of acceptance and success there, and I definitely would like to see that move forward as well as the NTB space, and sort of not one or the other, because I think that growing community really has waited a long time and deserves it. Thanks so much for all the hard work on this.
Chairman Reamer.
All right, let's continue.
That was it, actually.
Oh, can you please show us a map of the districts again? I just wanted to get a chance to show the missing middle application that this plan adopts, because there's been a lot of confusion about this issue, and I think it's worth noting what we are doing, because people are saying that we are doing things and they're not in the plan. And I'd like for folks to see what we are doing.
Okay, so we can direct you to the district map, which will at least show you at a very high level the boundaries for the different districts. And I think the one you're talking about is the adjacent communities.
Adjacent communities.
Yes, adjacent communities. So on page 20, what, can't hold this up. I don't know how to show it to you, not in a Zoom.
We'll have to talk it through verbally, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
So when you're in, so there's one larger area. It's when you're in downtown Silver Spring. I think I might have described this last time, but we went through a consideration in this process of changing the zoning for the broader surrounding communities. What we have landed on in this plan is on Grove Street, which is off of Fenton Village. In between Grove and Fenton, there are commercial buildings. There's a very large apartment building, and there are single-family houses that are right up against that. And we felt that this would be a great application of this idea of a gentle density that would create a much more well-designed housing model for East Silver Spring and downtown, and create a transition between Grove and Fenton by allowing property owners there to do something that's a little bit more than a single family. And I think if you've been on Thayer Avenue, if you've been in that area, you see a single family home literally next door to a very large apartment tower. I think it might be 12 stories or something like that. It's quite large. And, that is an historic aberration. And this plan corrects that. And so there may be one other location. I think it's the senior.
So, right.
Community.
So I thank you. I will turn you, if you have your plan with you, page 73 is actually the more detailed page in the zoning for the adjacent communities.
So the issue is we're sort of out of the habit of using paper now because we are all shifted onto the screens with our PDFs.
But I can't share screens.
And you can't share screens. So we have a little technology thing we'll need to work on. I mean, in the future, that someone would be able to share it from that computer. But
yeah.
So there's a very limited targeted application of the zoning tools to allow for a slightly denser type of housing in a specific location with a very clear rationale. And that's what the plan does, and that's what we're voting for. And I think that's what we will be voting for. And I commend everyone to take a look at what we're doing and give that some thought. That's all. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. We will continue this discussion. The next meeting will be in committee. Then we will come back to full council and take the next step forward. Thank you all very much, and we'll follow up with some of those questions. Thank you. All right. That takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 3, which is an action. This is regarding Executive Regulation 1821, Water Quality Protection Charge, definition of treatment. There has been, it's E&E Committee recommendation for approval. There was a pause to get some more information, and I turned back to the committee chair to give us an overview on Mr. Hucker. And then over to Ms. Wellens and Mr. Levchenko to walk us through the packet.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, you covered it well. The T&E committee took this up on February 18th, recommended approval at the time. Then there's additional information that was brought to our attention subsequent to that meeting. So it was on this item was on the consent agenda for March 14th, but with the concerns we had received regarding the regulation from an attorney representing many property owners, and involved in a case against the county regarding the water protection charge, we agreed to delay it to allow the council and our staff in particular to spend more time looking into the details. My understanding is now that central staff have been in touch with both the attorney and the Office of County Attorney, and can give us some new information to bring us up to speed. So Ms. Wellens and Mr. Levchenko are here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just to provide some background to the council, which has not really heard this directly as the T&E committee did. Executive Regulation 1821 was transmitted by the executive back in January.
If we could ask those in the back of the room to please take the conversation outside. Thank you so much.
It was transmitted to the council back in January. The intent was to clarify existing practice for the water quality protection charge credits. The credit program itself was established by law in 2013, and then with follow-up regulations in 2014. So it's about 8 years old. Subsequent to that, we have had some litigation, which is what Mr. Hucker was alluding to. And the DEP and the county attorney felt there was significant confusion, that clarification was needed through this regulation, specifically to define what treatment means. The existing regulation and law presumes to use existing or other resources, such as the state stormwater design manual and other state documents, to reference treatment. But in this case, they felt that it was important to actually put it in the regulation, what was meant by treatment, based on the litigation to date, as well as just general confusion that could occur going forward. So the only thing that this regulation does is add a definition of the word treatment and treat. It's intended to, once again, allow DEP to continue to administer the credit program as it is now. So that's sort of the framework for the regulation. Now, in the discussion at the committee and in subsequent feedback we've received from a attorney representing some of the litigants, as well as the stormwater partners, there's an interest in a broader look at the credit program and how it might be revised. And staff has noted to the committee that we could take that up at a later date. That would likely involve potential legislation as well as regulation in order to do that. And there are a lot of moving parts with the water quality protection charge and the credit program. So staff is leery of trying to do that at the table. That would require significant input from stakeholders and from executive staff, and a lot of work here at the council to iron out exactly how we want to move forward with any changes. But in advance of that, we think it is important to recognize the existing program and keep it viable going forward. And staff is supportive of the executive regulation that's before the committee today, or before the council today. Now I will turn to Ms. Wellens to speak more specifically to some of the feedback received from the attorney for the litigants and clarify that, since that is what has caused this issue to come back and forth to the council a couple of times, and we want to make sure you understand the context of that.
Thank you, and good morning, council members. To pick up where Keith left off, yes, as you'll recall, when this item was previously on the consent calendar, that some concerns were raised by an attorney for the litigants, raising the question in particular of how would this regulation affect pending litigation, and that was something that needed to be brought to the council's attention. And also, as we as staff looked into it further, we wanted to clarify not only for matters that are subject to litigation, but also any pending applications that were submitted prior to the effective date of this regulation. How would those be treated? Will those be treated as the court interprets the existing language of the regulation, or would that be interpreted under the new amended regulatory language once it becomes effective? So we confirmed both through our own review of the law, but also through speaking with DEP and OCA, confirmed that their agreement with us that any court ruling, any court interpretation of the regulation as it stands now, that's what's going to apply to any applications that are pending. So it's only the applications for credits that are received after the effective date of the regulation, those would be affected by the regulatory change. The regulation, as Mr. Levchenko mentioned, it defines the word treatment. This water storm quality, the protection charge, is governed under county law, and that county law does not define treatment. So, council staff would suggest it's reasonable and appropriate to define it so we know how are we implementing this now. I think that's important not only so that DEP can continue its work in the near term without confusion hanging over everyone, but also so that the county can move forward with bond issuances that depend upon some clarity in the law and how the Water Quality Protection Clause, how it operates and how the credits are given. So that's why, just to echo Mr. Levchenko, why council staff feel that it's important to make this regulatory clarification in the near term, with the acknowledgement that if the council members or the council as a whole has more substantive concerns with how is this water charge, how is this charge being implemented? How are the credits being implemented? How is treatment defined? Like substantively, how should it be defined, into the future? That's certainly something that the council can look at in more detail, perhaps after the budget when there's some more time. And also just acknowledging that there are many stakeholders, not only the litigants who certainly have a great interest in how this program operates, but other advocates as well. So it certainly might benefit from further examination by the T&E committee or others in terms of whether the council would want to do any future legislation reviewing this matter. And happy to try to answer any questions. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you. So I'll just summarize it at an extraordinarily high level here. The staff is still recommending that we move forward with the recommendations that the T&E committee has recommended, but that we come back and look at the underlying system and see if changes need to be made generally to the county code, which I think makes sense. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? Hearing none, then we have a committee recommendation. All those in favor of that committee recommendation, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you. All right, that moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent calendar. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar? Moved by Council Vice President Glass, seconded by Councilmember Rice. Are there any questions or comments regarding the consent calendar? Hearing none, all those in favor of the consent calendar, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. And with that, colleagues, we are adjourned until 1:30. Thank you.
Network to help connect residents to and spread awareness both of these issues as well as the resources that are available. So really